Let me show you how I do my smile designs and digital wax ups on the Romexis system. So first I'm going to load in a full face shot, and I'm going to get the interpupillary lines lined up and the base of the nose. What we have here is that green box, and the blue circles are for patient identity reasons. I didn't want to put the whole patient's face on this demonstration, so I've de-identified the photograph, but normally you would have obviously the eyes and everything like that. And so the first step is to get that lined up, and then the second step is to make a calibration measurement. We know that the average iris is about 11.8 millimeters wide. Okay, so those are going to be my calibration measurements if I don't happen to have a measurement of a tooth or something else on the patient's face, and that generally is very accurate because there's very little deviations in the iris diameter. Okay, so we're going to then go and mark next and do the smile line, and if you look up there at these tabs, basically it takes you through what you need to do. So the next tab is to import the retracted smile shot, and to get this to merge, you're just going to match common data points. Very easy. Obviously, the resolution of the full face photo and the intraoral retracted is going to be a little bit different, so it's going to be important to try to pay attention to distinct anatomical details. So now we have a merge of those two separate files, and we could start tweaking this overlay. For this particular patient, because of whatever reason, it was important that we just did the front four. We didn't want to go beyond that right now, although ideally we would have done more than just the front four. And so you're going to just start to drag and manipulate, and then do mirror images once you have one that you kind of like, and then just fine tune it in order to keep symmetry. If you want to create a new drag point, you could double click that line and you will create another drag point. The average central incisor is about 10 to 10.5 millimeters wide, long, and the lateral incisor is usually around 8.2. So we can see we have long lateral incisors here because of, it looks like compensatory eruption of the central incisors has occurred, and then you have some recession of the lateral incisors. So we could measure here about 10.3 for the central, so that's kind of within the normal range of the 10 to 10.5, and we're about probably going to be 8 something wide, 8.2 wide. So remember, you want a 1 to 1.2 ratio for that, or the width to be about 75 to 80% of the length. So we're pretty good there with our measurements, and that's just going off of the iris diameter once again. So now we're going to fine-tune some things in here. I like to just quickly use the clone and morph tools to make the centrals a little bit more symmetrical, because otherwise the ghost over of the smile design tends to show the background of the tongue. So I'm using morph in this instance and just dragging that. And probably going to use mirror image now to create even more symmetry. And when you do mirror image, it's important that you find a common reference point. So that was not mirror image. Here's mirror image right here. I'm going to right click to set that, and then you're going to slowly follow the outline so that you create an identical mirror image of those two teeth. And just so that when I ghost over that, I have a better background to show the patient. So now I'm going to transpose this into the design software. And I have an intraoral scan that I saw when the patient on the first day. This was done, with the Emerald, it takes seconds to do intraoral scans, full arches. And so now we're going to just mark veneer margins. This case was set up as veneer, 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 veneer. So you could also set up as pontic, 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 pontic. but I typically do one or the other depending on whether or not I'm going to be manipulating gingival cervical areas a lot. Then I'll do pontics because it's easier to drag over the tissue. But for this instance, since I'm not altering the gingival contours of these teeth, I'm going to be using veneer for design mode. Just marking arbitrarily on these teeth, making sure to circumscribe everything. And you're going to go to your plan tab and just, move, rotate, and manipulate those teeth in the plan tab to get them kind of roughly where you would want them. I am not using my smile design overlay at this point. It's just a little bit too premature for me to break that out at this point. I like to almost get the thing completely designed the way that I like it and then overlay the smile design first after. So like I said, so you have those tools down there, move, rotate, and resize. And so I'm just manipulating those and trying to get an aesthetic that I'm happy with for the preliminary plan and looking from all different angles. All right, so if you notice that I'm labially positioning those 8 and 9s compared to the pre-op condition because I felt like we could use a little bit more forward position of those because they're retroclined to begin with. And sometimes that messes up the design a little bit, but in this instance it's not going to be a big deal because we're not milling anything. We're using this to 3D print, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. So just tweaking these teeth, trying to get them to kind of the way I like them. And so we're going to go now to the design tab. Everything, one final glance over of the plan. Okay, looking pretty good to my eye. I think it's, let's see what autogenesis gives us. I do typically turn off autogenesis depending on the case and just let it automatically do from the plan tab. Here's our first. Now don't worry about holes, it doesn't matter. Those laterals are already proclined a little bit, so my additive wax up here should probably have holes in it. It's okay. And so now I'm going to just use rubber tooth and start tweaking these. Like I said, I wish I could do something with the cervical levels. I wish I could do the cuspids, but not every case is going to be, the patient's not going to be financially able to do everything that you want to do. It's sometimes good to compromise and see what you could do with just doing the front four in some instances. But also in this particular case, you'll see when we go on later on and I show you the design of the actual on the preps that you'll see that we went for a color change for the front four and we're going to bleach the cuspids. But here we go, just tweaking this a little bit. I don't love the symmetry on the 8 and 9, so I'm going to move that margin over on 9 just a little bit, and you'll see that changes everything. It's going to really allow me to get a good deep facial embrasure and have adequate emergence profile between those two. We're almost done. I'm just going to once again deepen that facial embrasure using the smooth tool, and now I'm going to open that up a little bit, get some good emergence profile there, and Now I'm going to bring in the smile design. And you manipulate it and stretch it, and you could rotate the model as well and try to get your cervicals lined up. There we go. And so now I could see that I have maybe my centrals are a little bit too long and my laterals aren't quite the right contours on the distal as they drop down too far incisally. So I'm just going to use my smooth tool on full strength and I'm going to just kind of melt it away slowly, trying to get it in line with my smile design that the patient's already approved. In fact, I like to oftentimes do it with them sitting in the chair to get their feedback on the smile design. And that's actually how we were able to convince this patient to do 4 instead of just 2. And here we go. Pretty perfect match there. I'm really liking my central incisor length to width ratio. So now I like this, I might just add a little bit of highlight or accentuation of the mesial lobes here and try to get those as parallel as I can to one another. And that's just using the dropper and smooth tool, just kind of altering the way the light reflects off of those line angles there and kind of further deepening the facial embrasure that I like to do, as you'll see oftentimes when you watch me wax. Rubber tooth on small to sharpen that mesial incisal angle a little bit. And once again, if you want to make them tooth colored like this instead of having blue, it's Alt Shift at the same time. All right, so because we have an open system, we could easily export all that work as STL files. So it's really cool. So I'm just exporting 3D model export. It's going to generate plies, which are color, and STLs, which are not. So you're going to find a folder that you wish to save those in this instance, saving them right here. And I'm going to load that prep STL into MeshMixer. MeshMixer is a free program that you can download. And then I'm going to download into MeshMixer each restoration by using the import feature, and they're going to come stitched to the model. However, they are still separate and distinct. They are not one model yet. They are individual pieces. So you shift click on the right there and hit combine. That's going to create one solid model. And although they're different colors, it's definitely a solid model. Now what you need to do for 3D printing purposes is make that solid model watertight and no cracks, gaps, or anything like that that could interfere with printing. And to do that, you go to the Edit, Make Solid icon. And it's going to go through a sophisticated algorithm of ensuring that the veneers are indeed tight to the stone model and there's no spacing that's going to occur. And typically when it does this for the first time, what you're going to get after is a kind of a ghost image because it doesn't have any surface texture added to it or shaders. And then also the way that it defaults for this is it does it fast, so it doesn't do it very precise or very accurate when it creates the solid model. So you oftentimes have to go back and tweak the settings. So let me show you what I mean by that. This is the default. You see how it has, all the starburst lines and things like that. So here, if you go to solid accuracy and you dial that to the right, now we could see we have, and you could even go even further. It's depending on how accurate you want to go. But you have a little bit better of a representation of your wax up. And then you could, so once again, you could go to more accurate right there and slide that all the way to the right, okay? And it's going to render that, and then you could drag a shader. You have to accept it and then drag a shader so that you could see the color, the highlights. From here, you could also further tweak it, like remove any extraneous points in space. That's going to interfere with printing. So you go to the select icon, you rub it, and then you hit remove. So select, and then you go to edit and remove. There, so now it's ready to 3D print. You could send it to your lab, and they'll charge you about 15 bucks to print it, or I just print it myself, about $5 in-house. If you had an area you don't love, you could smooth it by going to the smooth tool and just, that one was a little bit too much, so I'm going to back off there and go to a more gentle smooth tool down there, and you could smooth, soften it. If any lines that you don't like, you could kind of just manipulate them a little bit. And then look at the linguals as well, and maybe you could smooth some areas back there if you want, but not too important here. So now we're going to export that as a STL file, and you're good to go. So here we are the day of preparation, and I have a 3D printed model that I scanned in to the system, to the plan CAD. So I'm going to mark my margins just like you normally do. And for these instances, we decided to use almost like 3/4 crown preps or aggressive veneer preps because we're altering the proximal contact location of these teeth. Very little facial reduction was actually done on those centrals. We just put finish lines. And so here's the printed wax up. That I scanned in. And I'm just marking what I want it to copy. And so now we're going to use the clone feature and clone those wax ups. The reason why I like to do this is because I've already worked out everything with tooth size ratios and smile design. I've got the midline the way that I wanted it. I got the overall kind of shape of the way that I wanted it before the patient is in the chair, because the patient's sitting in the chair right now, and I'm going to mill these same day, so I don't want to spend a ton of time working all that stuff out when I could easily have done it beforehand. So now I'm just ghosting over my wax up and looking at material thickness and things like that, and just adding some personal touch to it, taking occlusion into consideration and things like that. I always spend a lot of time on the mesials of the centrals. It's pretty much where you'll see me spend all my time. Now I'm getting my proximal contacts dialed in. Like, that whole design was about 5 minutes or so, I don't know. Quick. Patients doesn't want to be here all day. Proximals are that teal Hawaii blue color. Alright, so I think we're pretty much ready, and that's what we got. We were a little bit bright, but the patient wanted that. That's the day of delivery there, and so we'll see what it looks like in a few weeks. Anyway, this is what I do for all my cases. It's really cool to be able to do the 2D smile design, bring it into a pre-op scan, wax it up, 3D print it, and have that. So what if I wanted to make provisionals, or what if I want to try that smile in, as oftentimes I do, into the patient's mouth and see what they think. I have that wax up printed, ready to go, all for very little money. And so this is the type of stuff that I think that we could do that many other systems can't do. They're just not open enough to allow you to have the freedom.